Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. Let's have a look today at a landmark ruling regarding segregation, Brown v. Board Education. Let's begin with the background of the case. In 1896, the Supreme Court ruled in Plessy v. Ferguson that racially segregated public facilities were legal as long as the facilities for black people and whites were equal. The ruling constitutionally forbids African Americans from sharing the same buses, schools, and other public facilities as whites, known as Jim Crow laws, and established the separate but equal doctrine that would stand for the next 6 decades. But by the early 1950s, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, was working hard to challenge segregation laws in public schools and had filed lawsuits on behalf of plaintiffs in southern states. In the case of Brown v. Board Education, the plaintiff, named Oliver Brown, filed a class action suit against the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas in 1951 after his daughter, Linda Brown, was denied entrance to Topeka's all-white elementary schools. The case went before the U.S. District Court in Kansas, which agreed that public school segregation had a detrimental effect upon the colored children and contributed to a sense of inferiority, but still upheld the separate but equal doctrine. Therefore, Brown lodged an appeal before the Supreme Court. When Brown's case and four other cases, Bridge v. Elliott, David v. Board of Education of Prince Edward, Bowling v. Sharp, and Gebhardt v. Ethel, were first heard by the Supreme Court in 1952. The court combined them into a single case that came to be known as Brown v. Education. While the facts of each case were different, the main issue at stake was the constitutionality of state policy related to segregation in public schools. Thurgood Marshall, the head of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, served as chief attorney for all the plaintiffs. Let's move on with the judgment and the legal reasoning. The issue at stake was does the segregation on the basis of race in public schools deprive minority children of equal educational opportunities, violating the 14th Amendment. In his lawsuit, Brown claimed that schools for black children were not equal to the white schools, and that segregation violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. It sets that no state can deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. At first, the justices were deeply divided over the issues raised, notably Chief Justice Vinson, who thought that Plessy verdict should stand. Unable to come to a solution by June 1953, the court decided to rehear the case in December of the same year. But in September, Vinson died, and President Dwight D. Eisenhower replaced him with Earl Warren, then Governor of California. The new Chief Justice succeeded in building a unanimous verdict declaring segregation in public schools unconstitutional. In the decision issued on 1954, Justice Earl Warren wrote that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place, as segregated schools are inherently unequal. He also said, in the eyes of the law, justice was colorblind. The court ruled that the plaintiffs were being deprived of the equal protection of the laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. It was referring to the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment that lays out the foundation for a constitutional guarantee that no person or class of persons shall be denied the same protection of the laws that is enjoyed by other persons or other classes. Therefore, by overturning Plessy v. Ferguson, as well as the separate but equal doctrine, the court's decision in Brown v. Board of Education had set the legal precedent that would be used to overturn laws enforcing segregation in other public facilities. Let's finish our analysis with the impact of the ruling. Though the Supreme Court's decision didn't achieve school desegregation on its own, the ruling helped to spark the civil rights movement in the United States. In 1955, for example, a year after the Broad v. Board of Education decision, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Her arrest sparked again the Montgomery bus boycott and would lead to other boycotts and demonstrations that would eventually lead to strike down Jim Crow laws. And although it would be many years before all segregated school systems were to be desegregated, Brown and Brown 2, the court's plan for how to desegregate schools came to be called, were responsible for getting the process underway. A landmark piece of civil rights legislation, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, was followed by the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. In 1976, the Supreme Court issued another landmark decision in Runyon v. McCrary, ruling that even private, non-sectarian schools that denied admission to students on the basis of race violated federal civil rights laws.